In 2 minutes, we'll welcome them.
All right, it is recorded.
So Darren, one of the things that came up in one of my earlier meetings was like certificates of occupancy being held up and then loans being held up and all that. And I think that was from the county. The city said, you know, on their website that it's a case by case basis. My agent called the county and they said, sorry, and it's like, the house is done, it just needs that final inspection. And so I have a feeling that the amount of people on the call, we're going to open up some things where there might be some crosstalk between people saying, oh, I did this or I had that, and offering solutions hopefully too for some of the complex issues.
Might be worthwhile to keep up with them. I had a chance to talk with the city manager on Tuesday for Spokane, and he is saying that they are working as hard as they can to get those occupancy permits turned as far as they're concerned. The challenge that they're seeing is that it's also the interface with the state. That seems to be bogging it up for them.
Yeah, like I say, I think the city's being a bit more. They're trying to make things work. It doesn't sound like the county's being quite as agreeable for whatever reason.
I believe we're ready to start.
Yeah.
Kudoki.
That being said, everybody, welcome to the, I won't call it second annual, but the second Zoom conference for the Spokane Association of Realtors. A little bit different format today. We're going to use the Q&A portion of the screen instead of the chat portion. The Q&A portion allows us to take questions one at a time and delete them as they're answered rather than stay on the screen and muddy things up. So, and you'll be able to see us. We won't be able to see you. We do welcome you, welcome your questions. Hopefully we can answer a majority of them. It's a moving target, so sometimes there just won't be an answer. That being said, your moderator today is Darren Watkins, and he's about to take over.
Thanks, Tom. I think what's interesting to note is that things are changing both the state and the federal level every single day. I can't stress enough how important it is for us to stay in contact. The primary sources of information that you can link to are our Spokane Association of Realtors website. Make sure you're looking at those daily notices or those notices that we're sending out because things are quickly changing. There's two key websites to look for on a national and a state level for guidance. The national website is the nar.realtor/coronavirus. On the state level, it's warealtor.org/COVID-19. Those links are on our website as well. We are finding a lot of great resources there. When things change, they're trying to update them. For example, just the last few days alone, we've seen change in the governor's office on who can be involved with a real estate transition, everything from photographers to staging agents. And so it's difficult for us to put out guidance because almost as soon as it does, it changes. So make sure you're up to speed with watching that. So with that, again, the process here today is if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the question and answer. We've got some here that we've taken during the week from other people. We'll try to address those. And Tom, we could just start with you. Tell me what kind of thing you're hearing from realtor members that are contacting you, and what areas seem to be of the biggest concern?
Well, I think the biggest concern right now is new construction, getting the homes finished, getting the certificates of occupancy, and then an interesting one that came up earlier today for me, or to me, I should say, with a phone call and an email from one of our members was that they've got their lenders to start doing holdbacks for some of the, like putting in the yards or finishing the deck or something like that after the certificate of occupancy. If there's still some work to do, they can still close that loan with a holdback so that when the builder can go to work, they can finish the deck or finish the project. And so, I guess what I would do is I challenge all your favorite lenders to, hey, if these guys can do a holdback, how come you can't? So that's kind of the big hot button right now is new construction.
And Sabrina, how about you from your perspective? What kind of things are agents and brokers talking about?
Same stuff everybody else is talking about. When can we get back to work, right? Which now with the governor's announcement yesterday that the stay home, stay healthy order has been extended to now May 4th. We are all staying home now until May 4th. Yes, there are certain things that we can leave our homes to do, list a house, show a house, take photos, that sort of thing. But my biggest fear is too many of our industry are hearing that, we've been now deemed essential and they think it's business as usual. And I just cannot caution people enough to say it is not business as usual. You need to be home. There are very limited circumstances that you can be out and about, showing a house, listing a house, and under the governor's prescribed orders, no more than 2 at a time in a house, maintaining 6-foot social distance after making an appointment, and very limited circumstances even that you can do that. So I think we're all concerned, when can we get back to business as usual, but doing the best we can do from home.
Eric Johnson, you currently work quite a bit with the folks in Legislative Affairs, incoming chair of that committee. Can you give us a sense for what kind of work is going on behind the scenes, realtors, at least both with the state and with the government?
Yeah, I think there obviously a big push by staff and leadership of Washington Realtors to be in the position we're in today, which is and that how we went about that was with more of a hat in hand approach to the governor versus, hey, you need to because we're the biggest pack in the state and you don't want to be which would be a foolish, that's not a good way to get anything done, frankly. And so we went to the governor and said, here's our concerns. We have 17,000 plus transactions in the pipeline. People need housing. They need a place to live, and this is kind of a basic need of people, and we need to be able to operate on some baseline level. Here is some suggestions we have where we could operate yet still be safe and respect the stay-at-home order. And I think it's very important that we all need to understand the real reason why this is happening, because you can be carrying this virus and not know it. You can infect somebody and put them in the hospital. You yourself could get infected. This isn't like some made up thing. And I think a lot of people out there, we're hearing more and more people of wives and husbands of agents in our company and teenagers. And so absolutely, we want you guys to make a living and continue to produce for yourself and your companies and that. But just caution to everyone that remember the real reason and the safety reasons behind all of this. And it's not it's something that we need to be very respectful of. So as things come up, I can tell you the staff at Washington Realtors has a direct line to one of the governors the governor basically appointed somebody to deal with us. And so what we're trying to do is, again, be sparing with our communications, and because we kept on getting asked, what about this exception? What about that exception? What about this exception? Right. And in the meantime, the governor's trying to get ventilators for the state, right? Absolutely, we're worried about house cleaners being able to get in there and do their job, but that's probably not the top of his list. And so we're trying to be pretty rationed with how we have those communications. And what we're finding is sometimes there's enough pressure. They're getting enough pressure from other spaces where then they come to us and say, hey, what do you think about this? And then we're able to weigh in on it. And so it's interesting dynamic. And unfortunately, we're in a really good spot from a relationship standpoint and political standpoint to be effective.
So in the last week or so, we know that realtors have been able to get back to a certain extent to be able to use people to come into the home, following social distancing, only 2 people at a time. Those guidelines are for us. But one of the questions that's coming up now, and this is a great one, on as it relates to repair construction. Eric, are you hearing anything about whether or not we're asking for anything additional, for example, for inspection repairs to be added to our list of requests from the governor's office? Is that all there yet? Do we know?
I don't know. I'll just be quite honest with you. That didn't come in today. We had an RPAC meeting just before this, and we didn't get into too many specifics on that. I think with those contractors and whatnot, if they're, and somebody might have, in like Tom Hormel or something like that, might have better information than me because he's been in way more exec meetings than I have. But contractors as a whole kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit. But if it's necessary to get a home closed, that is a good question, and I just don't know the answer off the top of my head. So that's something I might in back channel ask Tom real quick while we're on the line.
I think it's pretty important to keep in mind that what the governor is doing is continually adding to his list of essential services, right? And as first announced, his Stay Home, Stay Healthy order, the essential services were the escrow and title officers to close the $17,000 transactions in the pipeline, right? And then the governor's office thankfully heard the realtors say, but those folks can't effectively close if we can't meet our buyers to conduct the final walkthrough, if we can't meet our buyers to give them the keys, right? And so that's, I think, what really starts the snowball going down the hill, where now we add realtors to that. And then the next thing we hear is that we need to be able to, sellers have to be able to sell their homes if they're in distress. So we have to be able to list and market homes. And if we list and market, then who's the next additional snow to the snowball? Well, we need stagers and photographers at it, right? So, but when we talk about keeping in mind that we're asking him to add to essential services, there are other options to the question of inspection work requirements. And Annie covered this in one of her videos. There are other options, which is to say you can negotiate a financial concession for those items that the buyer wanted the seller to repair. So I'm working on one of my own deals right now where that's what we did. We had the inspection done that Wednesday before we were all sent home, and the radon came back high and there were broken windows and whatever. The seller was able to get the bids and we negotiated our 35R, and the seller said, I agree to do these things if I can prior to closing, but if not, I'll give you a price concession based on these bids. So I don't think the governor is going to add back in contracting overall, just as a general, because I don't think that's essential. There's another option, if that makes sense.
Right.
Now, whether we determine there's a housing shortage and we need the construction of houses, I mean, maybe Eric, Tom, whoever can weigh in on that. But I think that's how the governor is looking at that. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's just my 2 cents about it.
Well, I'm thinking outside the box on what Sabrina was saying. If there are some repairs that surface as a result of a home inspection or an appraisal or something like that, the lenders are starting to get creative about allowing a holdback to get that work done after the contractors are allowed to go back to work. So typical holdback in the winter for paint is 1.5 times the bid amount. They hold it in escrow. When the painting is done, the money is released to the contractor and the balance is given back to the party that paid it. So put a little pressure on your lender and ask them to get creative, and that may answer a few of our questions too. I hate to use the term workaround because that was became kind of a negative term here earlier in the last couple of weeks. But there are some creative thinking and some negotiating might just be the ticket.
It's a good answer, Tom. Also, one of the questions just popped up, Tom, if you could address this, is about getting the message, right? I mean, we've been sending out emails and we've been posting things to the website. Julie Coleman asked about, what about just some phone messaging, especially just to drive home this point that it really isn't business as normal. We have to come up with some new ideas in this changing paradigm.
I'm not sure I understood the question then, but
Well, Julie was
how else?
not everyone was getting the message, especially about the way we should act and parameters we can operate under. And she's asking about, for example, should we consider phone message to go out to say, just a reminder, it's not business as usual. Are people getting the message, or what's your thought, Tom?
well, my personal thought is the message is out there. If they're not getting it, I don't think that's necessarily the messenger's fault. I think, you know, with it being on the websites, it's everywhere from Facebook on 2 or 3 different websites, not to mention the one we should be going to, which is Spokane Realtor website. And then SpokaneRealtor.com has not only all of our local information on it, but it's also got links to the state and to the federal, to the NAR and WR. And so the information is available for us to be able to operate within the parameters that the governor has allowed us to operate in. And it's critical that we do that. We've gotten the latitude that we've received in the last week because we were paying attention and controlling ourselves more than possibly some others.
Well, and I would tack on to that, Tom, what the governor giveth, the governor may taketh away.
Oh,
And, you know, to Julie's point, I think you literally have to be living under a rock as a realtor to not have heard the message that it's not business as usual. If you're not watching Annie's videos, looking at the Washington Realtors Daily Update, looking at the Spokane Association Realtors Update. So sadly, I think if people are out there doing business as usual, it's not because they haven't heard the message, in my opinion. It's that they're choosing to ignore the message. And I think, frankly, brokers, to the extent that of our 100 participants today, any of you are designated brokers, managing brokers, it's up to us to step up in leadership within our offices and shut down that activity when we see it, and make sure that our leadership message to our people and in and amongst each other as colleagues is to say, go home, stay home. Very limited circumstances that you can leave your house.
Well said. Also, there's, as you can imagine, a lot of information out there that may not be accurate. In fact, some of it is just when it delves into opinion that gets added on to bad information, those things can be a dangerous combination. Right now, we're seeing that clients. A lot of clients are seeing things on Facebook and contacting realtors saying, oh, this whole thing's overblown, or this is a hoax, this is a comment that was just made on the Q&A here. And so what do we do for our clients when they're a mindset that, oh, this is overblown, we should do this anyway? What kind of advice do we give them? Eric, you want to tackle this one?
Well, I think, again, we have to go back to the original intent of what's going on in the current state of things, and the fact that this is a highly infectious virus. And so it's something that is it's a real thing. And because, you know, we're all sheltered right now and I'm healthy. I've been healthy for 3 weeks. Like, wow, I want to go out and do stuff. I'm not I'm like everyone else, but I also have an RN as a wife, and she won't let me do anything. But seriously, I think we need to advise our clients that, you know, we can still do things on a limited basis. It's going to be a little bit more arduous because of the 2-person rule and those things. But if you really think about it, there's not many functions that we cannot do right now if we are being safe and appropriate with what needs to get done. And so I think we can just set the client's expectation to the fact that, you know, absolutely, we'll get the photographer in there. Absolutely, I'll get your paperwork signed. Some of these things are going to be more remote than I typically would do them. But there's still workarounds. You know, I Tom, sorry, I don't want to use the word workarounds, but there's still a way to achieve the goal within the parameters of being responsible as citizens and respecting the health of each other, which is again the most important part.
Could I quickly share my screen and share with everybody the, would it be okay, Tom, to share that piece that came out from Washington Realtors and Northwest MLS, the public handout that you could send to your clients?
Sure.
Would that be okay? I'd love to show this to everybody just in case people haven't seen it.
Right.
I'll pull it up, but I've actually started a COVID, I'm ashamed to say it, but
Was that this one?
sheet.
There it is,
The information for home buyers and sellers, that one?
That is the one. And
Came out yesterday? Yeah.
if all y'all can see it, here it is. This is a sheet that was produced by Northwest MLS in connection with Washington Realtors. I sent it to all my folks in my office. I think designated brokers, managing brokers, you could send this. Tacking on to Eric's point, send this out to all of your clients, especially to the clients that maybe don't believe for whatever reason that we have to abide by these orders, because this makes it very clear that this is the governor's order. This is what we can do. This is what we can do. These are the limitations. And frankly, violations of this, it's not just a fine. This isn't something that is just like, well, it's just the cost of doing business if I'm caught. I could potentially lose my license. I could potentially lose my business license and the ability to continue to make a living if I don't abide by the governor's orders here. So this is what I'm having my folks send out to their people, their clients, if they have any questions about it.
All right. Good question. It does lie in many cases with the managing broker to make sure that the information is getting out. Tom, we're getting more comments again about what to do when we see violations, especially we're hearing everything from multiple people going into homes, buyers going in by themselves. Just, we know that may fall outside of the guidelines, but what kind of advice would you offer?
Well, first of all, I think people need to understand that if they're doing things outside of the guidelines, they're only going to hurt themselves and the rest of us. So I don't know how many of you are aware, but we do have one of our members that's tested positive. And that's kind of a big deal that hits awful close to home. We've also, I also closed with one of our mobile notaries here a couple of weeks ago, and 2 days after that, she closed another party, and that party ended up being tested positive. So she's kind of in a quarantine mode herself right now in hopes that she didn't contract the virus. So I mean, this is not a everybody but us type of a scenario, kind of like what Eric was saying. I feel good. I should be able to go out and do whatever I want. Well, you know what? When I do that, I don't just risk my family, I risk everybody's families. Everybody I come in contact, everybody I come close to. So the governor, of course, has given us the go ahead, I guess, to turn each other in if we see something happening. We also have our own ethics and professional standards committees and policies, and so we can go through that process and handle it locally. But it's a big deal that we talk to those people that we see stepping across the line and say, hey, don't do that to me and don't do it to yourself. So be a good citizen, a good steward.
Spokane is often joked about as being 3 degrees of separation, that we're all connected by just 3 degrees. And once you have an influence like this of a virus, I think we can all have a story of someone connected, and I think those stories will increase. They won't get less. Right. One of the issues that came up, we were talking about, you can giveth and taketh away. Tom Hormel just posted that's exactly what happened in the state of New York, where the governor granted access and issues, but then revoked it. So it's just something for us to keep going. It could be fluid. One of the questions that are coming up again about what happens with small things that are still blocking the process. For example, if there is an appraisal required repair, what do you do then? Tom, you have an idea?
Well, that's the holdback situation. Like in winter, we get holdbacks when we get appraisal requirements for paint because of lead paint, because of some peeling paint. Well, we get our bids, we go to the lender and say, hey, seller will pay this amount into an escrow account, and they'll do a holdback. So those kind of things, and it's not a workaround. It's, I mean, a little creative thinking, and we can make these things work. And especially with lending today, should be getting pretty creative also. And I believe they are. So there's ways around some of this stuff, and sometimes there's not a way around it. We're just going to have to dig in, and it is what it is.
Getting questions at the office, actually, were conversations about the unemployment opportunities, unemployment insurance payments possibilities for realtors. As you know, independent contractors have long kind of been left out in the cold when it comes to those kinds of things. In the federal legislation that was recently passed, especially in the Phase 3 section, there was what was provided called pandemic unemployment provisos. The challenge becomes is that the feds don't pay unemployment. That's done
That's
for
right.
each one of the states. Each one of the states individually discussed and talked with them about how to make that work. Eric, do you have any thoughts or updates on where we're at with filing for unemployment with independent contractors?
Well, based on the message I got from you earlier today, it looks like that application, they're saying wait until the middle of the month when they have the proper form up to for independent contractors to fill out. Because right now, if you're an independent contractor, you try to fill out the unemployment form, it says, who's your employer? Well, you don't have an employer. And so they're making adjustments to that form as we speak, and they're working on it because they understand there's a pretty good groundswell. From what I understand, at the Washington Realtor level, it would be retroactive. So if you applied at the 15th of the month, it does, the intent is to go back to where you would have been eligible. As far as the amounts go, that's a good question, because I believe the minimum standard is $600 a week for full-time employees. I was on another call, and so I apologize. This is a bit secondhand, but there's like a $600 minimum plus whatever percentage of the income you would receive. And so again, not 100%. I don't want anybody to take this to the bank, but it sounds like that would be a reasonable potential to happen if that is indeed the fact that that's a minimum, and the state would at least at some level provide that. But this is again a moving target. We're probably going to hear more about it next week, I'd imagine, as it develops.
I think you're right. The best we have right now from the Employment Security Division is that they are sending a link space that you can put in basically your email address. And once they have some decisions about independent contractors processes, they will send that letter out. I think the challenge also is that information is moving so fast. Let me give you an example. So there is, for example, currently 2 different loan programs available for people with the Small Business Administration. The first one went into effect this morning. You can begin sending in applications for what's called the PPP. It's the Paycheck Protection Program. If you are a broker and you want to keep your employees still operating and going, you can apply for this. It's a grant program. It's listed as a loan, but it's one of those tricky areas where the loan is just forgiven. And that can be used. It's a first come, first serve, but you do need to go through another layer of bureaucracy, which is a local lender who's approved by the SBA to try to get that done. Those processes are beginning as early as today. Information went out on that first thing this morning. The second is an EIDL. Basically it's for people who have suffered injury or loss, and those are loans that will be made in just the next few weeks. The irony about that is that one of the conference calls yesterday, as late as 3:30 in the afternoon, even the regional SBA directors weren't even told what the interest rate was until Al said in the middle of a conference call, someone said, oh, look, looks like the interest rate's going to be 1%. So there's going to be a lot of talk and a lot of conversation, but really look for the best guidance. The 2 places that we keep referring to, which are Washington Realtors and NAR, they take all this legislation, they pare it down to really what it fits the best for realtors. And that's, I would say, the best information for us to work for. Tom, have you heard about any campaigns or whatnot to help get the word out about how realtors should or shouldn't be acting, or maybe to the general public about this new era?
Truthfully, I haven't. I don't know of any outreach that's going on in order to educate the public on what realtors can do, other than the information that we have available for ourselves. We have the information available to our buyers and sellers. It could easily also be, in the newspaper for that matter. I've given a few interviews, and it's interesting. I might not be as dynamic as I think I am, because sometimes it just stays in the can. It doesn't come out on the air. So it's kind of we can tell the story, but it's up to them to broadcast it.
It's not a bad idea. There has been monies made available in the past. I just was looking at one of the recommendations that we should consider that, to see if NAR has any specific education money available. We'll look into that. That's a great, I'll write that one down as an option. Sabrina, how is the business of real estate going for you? And what lessons do you think we should start talking about?
Well, on the one hand, we're definitely seeing deals flub, right? I mean, deals that we had put together before this whole thing started, and deals that went together within the last couple of weeks. We're seeing deals fail because people are losing jobs or they're being furloughed. And that's a little bit scary for all of us. But by the same token, things are still hopping right along, right? We still have sellers that want to sell and buyers that want to buy. So I have a theory. I have no idea if it's accurate or not, but I'll just give you a little anecdotal evidence. I listed 2 properties the week before we were sent home. One was up in Camelot. One was out northwest of the Fairchild Air Force Base. The one in Camelot, in 2 days, I had 13 listing showings, resulting in 3 offers. It sold for well over the asking price. And this is after this had all started, before we went home, but before this, after this had started. And I thought, what the heck? I mean, I wondered if it would even get any looks, right? What the heck? It's as if nothing had happened. And then the same thing happened on the other one. Handful of showings resulting in 2 offers, selling for, at or over the asking. What I suspect is happening is that a lot of buyers are not able to buy. A lot, whatever that number is. Some buyers, a lot, are not able to buy. They don't qualify anymore. We're hearing about lenders increasing qualifying scores. You have to have a higher credit score now to qualify for the same program, et cetera. What I think it's done is create opportunity for those buyers that are still in the market that frankly still qualify. I think there are still plenty of buyers out there who have good jobs, secure jobs, good income, savings, whatever. So where that listing had 13 showings and 3 offers, I suspect prior to all of this chaos, it might have had 25 showings and 10 offers. But my sense of the market is that we still have a decent market. We're all learning how to navigate as much of it remotely as possible. But there are still buyers that can buy. And what this has done is create opportunity for those buyers who frankly might have lost out in the bidding war before because they were getting beat out by cash buyers who maybe are reining it in just a little bit. So I don't know if that's what Tom, Eric, other practitioners are finding, but as much as it's scary, we see buyers kind of going to the wind right now. We're still busy. We're still listing houses. We're still selling houses. The challenge is getting them across the finish line.
Well, I think what's happening too is Sabrina's underpricing her listings markedly, apparently, because
my sellers do not.
Apparently, show Sabrina listings. She's just giving those things away.
So, Tom, you have an opportunity to write a news article every week for the paper. It's been suggested maybe this would be a great topic area.
It'd be a terrific topic. Absolutely. I've made a note of it already. Yeah.
Some of the other areas we're hearing a lot of questions about are those that we work with, the people that we work with, right? All of the appraisers and the notaries and the now that the doors open for stagers and for photographers. While they're essentially an extension of our business, what kind of things can we do to make sure that they're following the guidelines, rules, and they're staying within the confines of the rules that we've been given so that we don't violate these things? Tom, we'll start with you.
I'm sorry, Darren, I was distracted. Give me the crib notes.
So again, this is the those that are an extension of what we are doing, those who are the photographers,
Oh,
those
the
who
third
are,
party folks.
but in a sense, we still tend to fit within the guidelines that we've been given. So how do we make sure that those who are working with us and for us are following the same rules and guidelines?
Well, you know, I've been asked, well, before stagers and photographers and inspectors and all these people were included as essential. I can't tell you how many questions I got about those. And it was interesting that, you know, half of the inspectors read the edict as they came down, the order from the governor, and they said, well, I'm in that group. And then half of them said, no, I'm not in that group. And so it was kind of a tough one. And we as realtors were kind of stuck in the middle. So people would ask me, well, one of my home inspectors says that he's an essential service provider and he can go do a home inspection, but the one I want to use can't. What do you say? And I say, you know what? We're not in the business of telling our third-party vendors whether they can go to work or not. However, when in doubt, the person to consult, in my opinion, is Annie Fitzsimmons, the Washington Realtor attorney. If you go to the legal hotline and type in your question, I don't know how many hours a day she's working, 28 or 30, I suppose, because you get a quick answer. It's amazing how during this time she's been able to keep up with those. So asking that question of Annie Fitzsimmons is probably your safest answer. And once again, my honest opinion is, when in doubt, stay home, you know, and make them stay home. It's just not worth it.
All I can tell you from firsthand experience that Annie responds very quickly. Her email is provided on the Washington Realtor website. If you have any legal questions, you can type them into her directly or on that Q&A form if you can't find an answer. And her answers have been pretty quick and pretty spot on, especially, as you've said, where it's not just the information today, it's linear. The information today may change tomorrow. And so it's
Absolutely.
really critical for all of us to stay in touch with those things. I think we're getting down to, we kind of promised this about 30 minutes. We're already over the top of that. Things are going pretty well. We haven't seen very many other questions, if there's any more questions to come up with. But what other kind of topics should be addressing right now about the stay-at-home guidelines? Or should we talk about what's in the business, or any additional changes on the horizon we need to be aware of? We'll go around here. Eric, I'll start with you.
I honestly don't know that there's going to be any more allowances given to us per se. I got to think something on the construction has got to give eventually, but that's pure supposition on my part, based on just the constraining factor of the market and the fact that those guys can work apart from each other and all that stuff. I'd like to think.
Eric, can you just clarify, because you were starting to talk about this before we started, but just clarify for folks, because my understanding of this is that contractors are not essential unless they're performing emergency
Correct.
repairs or work to maintain structural integrity of a business. So when we're driving around, and Tom, you alluded to this before we got started, if I'm driving to the store, which is the only reason I should be leaving my house, is to the store or to a doctor's appointment, right? And I'm driving by a new construction and I see worker bees there working on this new construction home. Is that a violation? So as you're talking about this, can you talk about what contracting can be done? And then to Hannah's first question of the day, is the governor going to be making exceptions, like for an FHA loan that has some work?
I just earlier, there's been, and contractors are, they're problem solvers just like we are, right? We get paid to figure out ways to get things done. And they're a fairly creative group themselves. And I have heard of some contractors saying, hey, I've got a hole in the ground. That's an attractive nuisance. This is an emergency. And I need to get that. Secured. That site secured. It's like, I'm not going to go out there and put a fence around it or something like that. And so, I think there's some things going on out in the marketplace where contractors are being creative in their interpretation of the rules, which, obviously we're not going to encourage that or support it. But we live in a human world, and human beings are pretty pretty creative when it comes to solving problems. So the only other constraining factor with that whole thing is, if you see a work crew on site, we don't really know why they're there, unless we go on site and inspect and be like, oh, hey, they're putting in cabinets, or they're doing something that's non-essential. Whether that's up to us to report them or whatnot, that's an individual decision in my opinion. But I had to drive and do some errands and went through a couple construction sites, and they were shut down. I saw nobody on site. And these were, 2 weeks ago when I drove through the same neighborhoods, there's people putting up walls and doing their thing and all that stuff. So I don't know that I've seen a bunch of people violating it. And frankly, if they are violating it, I can guarantee you somebody else is calling on them, right? And we heard that, with a specific builder earlier in a conversation I had, another Zoom meeting I was on, where he's getting called on every day because he keeps sending crews out, and so the cops have to come out there, and it's a whole thing. And so at some point in time, and you can't protect people from themselves and to that degree, and that's a legal issue that they have to tackle if they choose to take that risk.
Well, and to add to that a little bit, Marianne Bornhoff just texted me and said the Department of Labor and Industries is not sending out electrical inspectors. So even if the contractors are doing a certain amount of work, they're going to have to stop at some point for an inspection, I would assume, whether it's a structural inspection, labor and industries, electrical inspection, or something. And so at some point in time, somebody's going to pay the piper. And it's unfortunate, but for the time being, we're kind of stuck without being able to have contractors do anything other than emergency work.
I thought there was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember seeing somewhere, and to reiterate, everybody should be watching the daily update from Washington Realtors, because those frequently asked questions are being updated. That was a question I saw earlier. What about, is there going to be a link to updated information about photographers and stagers? Just look at the frequently asked questions coming out from Washington Realtors, because they have almost up to date. And then the follow up with Annie's videos. If you only spend time looking at those two things, I think you will be quite well informed about what we can be doing or not doing. But does anybody know, because I seem to remember there was a link in something that came out from somewhere that you could report non-essential work being done directly to, I don't know, it was the state. Does anybody remember where that was?
No, but do know that several projects have actually been allowed to continue, especially where federal funding and things like that were tied to a specific time frame. We do know that's been one of the challenges for the Builders Association, was that large projects are often allowed to continue, but residential is still being held at abeyance. But just again, those things are changing every day. Tom, one question that came up here was, if someone did have a complaint, and we're talking about if they see something that they believe is happening that's inappropriate, is it more appropriate for this to be a code of ethics grievance complaint, or would a violation actually constitute an MLS violation?
It's more of a, it's not an MLS violation. It's more of an ethics issue, in my opinion. And the reason is because it's the governor's order is law, and any violation of law is a breach in the code of ethics. So I think, as far as complaints, I think the governor actually has a place where you can complain, where each of us can complain individually. I didn't commit that to memory, because I know that we have our own grievance and our professional standards procedures that we can use to police ourselves. Annie may have a different opinion on that, or maybe Eric has a better idea on that.
No, I just think MLS rules are going to be very specific, right? Those are rules that are already written in place, and frankly, we don't have any rules around this, no. And we're not in a position to change the rules to accommodate it, because there was issues with people before the release of the governor gave us of people, putting in their showing information and things like that, saying, hey, the seller will show you, they'll meet you there and show you themselves, and all those sorts of, like, the workarounds, right, that we're so we're so good at creating, which has gone by the wayside with the order. But that's even that was tough. The MLS steering committee is like, well, what's the violation? We don't, it's violating the state law, but that's outside of our scope as a body. So I don't think we'll see many things fall into that context.
And I can't speak for every other designated broker, but I can say this, that for myself and my firm, that I would want to know. So if you see one of my people out there letting a family of buyers into a house to look at it, or one of my people walking into a house with a couple to show them the house, in terms of who do you report that violation to, call the designated broker. It's possible someone's been living under a rock and they don't know, what the governor's parameters are for these showings. Again, anecdotally, my husband, you all know, is a home inspection, and he showed up to do a home inspection the other day. He's operating under the same parameters, right? He cannot be there with more than one person in that house inspecting it, maintaining 6 foot social distance after an appointment has been made. And he showed up early, parked, waiting until the inspection time because there was a car in the driveway. Another car pulls in, seller walks in, and then the buyer's agent pulls up. So he anticipates it's to be the two of them. 15 minutes after the inspection is supposed to start, the seller's still in the house. So they walk up, ring the doorbell. They're just sitting down to lunch. The listing broker has not educated their seller that, hey, there's an inspection at 12:30 and you gotta go, because it can only be the inspector there and one other person, and that's probably going to be the buyer or the buyer's agent. So did that listing agent not know? Did they just not educate? What was the deal there? So this is an educational process we're living in right now. And so again, call me. If you see one of my people violating this rule, call me, because I'll use that as an opportunity to educate my client, just like we do if there's an ethics violation or an MLS rule. Let's work with each other, try to make sure everyone's on the same page. If there's not, if we don't fix it, then we figure out maybe where to file the complaint.
And Sabrina, I think it's important to note it's not just us watching. There are more and more pathways for people to report perceived violations or things that they see, especially where all of us are sitting at home, maybe people that are bored. But now there's new places, both with the city, the county, and even the state, for you to report what you think is a violation. Given the tone of what the governor talked about, it seems like things are starting to tighten down a little bit more, and he's encouraging more of those kinds of reporting activities. So we might start seeing more and more of those things, not just us policing ourselves, but people from the outside making complaints as well. I do want to bring at this point something I hadn't really considered that Robin had mentioned in the Q&A. Just think about what the liability might be if you're out meeting with clients and it turns out you accidentally give someone, or your pet tested positive for COVID-19, what that liability might be for clients that get sick as a result of your interaction. I mean, honestly, it would feel horrible if that happened from a personal standpoint, but the liability might be something for us to consider, right?
Yeah, if you saw part of the Q&A of what has to happen, what steps we have to go through as individuals if we test positive for COVID-19, and all the steps we have to go through to retrace our steps for I don't even know how many days and notify everybody that we've even come close to being in contact with, probably even driven down the street past. It's a daunting task if you find yourself in that situation.
Well, and the other thing to think about, Darren, sorry to interrupt you, but and we don't know. I mean, what happens if one of our members goes out and isn't respecting doesn't pay attention, and somebody does get infected and they file a wrongful death lawsuit. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. That's pretty extreme, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. It's America, right? I mean, and everybody wants their pound of flesh. And so if I had a loved one die, I guarantee you that'd be an avenue I'd be looking at. And I surely don't want to be on the back end of that as a broker, as a designated broker, as a business owner, as an independent contractor on any level. That's bad news. So I don't think we want to discount the absolute worst case scenario, which would be that.
And this is a difficult time. I mean, a number of inspectors or appraisers, or they're all making independent choices about whether or not even they will want to work during this difficult time. And I think that you're seeing people making that choice. And so the number of folks available even to do this work, now that they've been allowed to go back in as a personal choice, it may be difficult for us to find people to do work as we go along. So the last couple of areas to talk about, I guess there's still a lot of confusion about what the role might be for when you can get a plumber in or an electrician, or I'm seeing a lot of questions and comments here on the saying that there still seems to be a lot of ambiguity about this plumber says I can't work, but this one says they can. What guidance might we offer our realtors who are seeing a lot of confusion in the marketplace, Tom?
Well, I think you refer back to, rule number one, which is we're not going to control those people. We're not going to tell third-party vendors whether they can go to work and how they can make their living. But if we have doubt that what they're doing is correct, we need to go to Annie or ask Annie Fitzsimmons, what's the take on this? I see someone saying electricians and plumbers can still work. Well, I can tell you my electrician's not working because he tells me he's not an essential service provider. So I know he can do emergency work, but he can't just go out and put a new panel in one of my rentals for me. I was scheduled to have 3 of them done last week and they didn't get done, and they're not going to get done until contractors are deemed essential service providers. So we're all hearing different things, and when in doubt, we need to go to the source, which for us is Washington Realtors, because they're the ones that have the direct link to Governor Inslee's office.
I can tell you from our perspective as well, when it comes to issues about which entities are doing inspections, which ones aren't, we are pushing really hard in our lobbying efforts in the local level and on the state level to make sure that those inspections are happening. All I can tell you is just to keep trying to connect and trying to make those happen. I know that, Tom, we talked earlier today about having a difficulty getting electrical inspectors. Barb Paella just weighed in saying that they'd had some luck as well. So it may not be clear cut, but obviously they're feeling the pinch just like we are, with people not wanting to work because of the condition, wanting to stay home. At the same time, there's limited understanding about what people can and can't do. Sabrina, your thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, I think there's a distinction to be made between, when someone is released and then what they're released to do. So to Jim's point, sure, electricians and plumbers are in that initial carve out from the initial stay home rule, and I'd have to pull it up and look at it again. But some people were released to work, but only in certain circumstances, right? So I think electricians and plumbers, sure, certain contractual kind of work, contractors were released to work, but only in emergent circumstances. And I think that therein lies the confusion, where somebody, an electrician, sees that and says, well, because I do work sometimes in emergent circumstances, that means I can work all the time. And I don't think that was the governor's intent, because that was a conversation in our house when inspectors were initially, not approved. Jeff said, well, sometimes we go do emergent inspections for mold or because there's, a hole in the roof or whatever. So does that mean we can go to work? And it's, you got to look at the intent. What's the intent of the rule? And Eric keeps going back to this, and it's an excellent point. It's just stay freaking home, people. This is nasty stuff. If you don't have to go do that project, you shouldn't be going to do it, even if you are essential for other purposes.
And while Tom Hormel mentions that it's not our responsibility to give advice, or nor should we give advice to third-party vendors about how they should operate, we are responsible to a certain extent as to the work that we're instructing them or we are contracting with them to do. So I think it's critical at this point for us to make sure that folks are following the guidelines we've been given. And we can keep referring back to those. We're getting ready to the bottom of the hour here. Let's wrap things up with one more comment from our panelists and just where we're at and what we're thinking about. And Eric, if you don't mind, we can start with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the silver line, I can tell you the silver linings for all of us are any of those home projects that you've been putting off for the past 12 years are getting done probably in the next couple of weeks. I know we've got about 90% of ours done. But no, seriously, I think the biggest silver lining of all this is that once we get a handle on this, really our economy's paused, because once we all can go back out and do what we were doing prior to, that money's going to inject back into the marketplace. That employment's going to come back. Those restaurants are going to be able to, and hopefully the small business loans and those things can bridge the gap until that happens. And I really think, because the last real galvanizing event we had like this was really 9/11, and in my opinion, that was a very galvanized, but it was one of those things where we're all kind of looking at each other like, we need justice here. You know, it was like this kind of negative underpinnings of revenge kind of a thing. Whereas this is like, hey, the reason why I'm acting this way is because I care about you. Okay. The reason I'm not going out is because I care about your health and safety, person I don't know. And that's a hugely different psychological place to emerge from when you're coming back from a space where you're, you know, from a societal standpoint, when it's one of these galvanizing events. And so I have a feeling we're going to come back out of this thing a lot stronger and hopefully sooner than we think. But I think the mentality behind everybody is that, hey, we want to support each other. We want to get everyone back to work. We want to get everybody, this economy back going again. I think we're going to go gangbusters.
Couldn't agree more. And if anything has proven to me is just how resilient, resourceful I found realtors to be through this whole process. People are very creative in finding solutions, and it never ceases to surprise me. Sabrina, how about you?
Yeah, we're getting projects done around the house. Eric's correct. We're also on route watch day 1, week 1, because, you know, my hair salon is closed down. So y'all are about to see my natural hair color. Yeah, you know, we're all living in this new normal and figuring out how to operate and figure it all out. One of the most fascinating pieces of this for me is all of my inbox is more full than ever with people sending me things about, well, now you have all this time on your hands. You know, you can do this self-improvement class and do this webinar and that webinar. And I'm frankly finding myself more busy than I was before because it's taken me twice as long to do everything here at home. You know, I think just keeping our wits about ourselves, keeping our sanity, staying connected. You know, this is hour 5 for me today in Zoom meetings because I did an office training this morning for 3 hours. So I'll be sick of Zoom by the time it's all done. But I'm thankful that we are a resourceful industry and we're figuring out how to continue to meet the needs of our clients remotely, and so thankful for all the work of our SAR staff, our Washington Realtor staff, that, you know, we're going to keep our industry moving forward. And I totally agree with Eric. We'll come out the other end of this, you know, better, stronger for it. So yeah, NAR's doing some free, you know, got their right tools right now. There's so much good stuff that's going on out there that I don't frankly have the time to take advantage of, but lots of good stuff going on, and we're gonna survive it. So thanks for the opportunity.
For those of us who were on the conference call with the state this morning, the Zoom, Steve Franks, our CEO, our chief executive for the state, even made comment about it. I hardly recognized him with his nice beard and his shaggy hair. And I just couldn't help but think what we're all going to look like within a month when May 4th comes along. We should have a sharing party of some kind. Tom, your thoughts about as we wrap things up?
Well, kind of final thoughts are, I'm amazed at how this has brought a lot of realtors together. I've seen just a huge amount of compassion and a huge amount of cooperation amongst realtors to help each other get over these hurdles. Kind of along the lines of what Eric said also, I think that you know, with all negative things come some positives, and that's one of them. Is I think we're all going to be a little bit closer knit as a result of these challenges. I also believe that we're going to come out of this a lot stronger on the other end. We were fortunate to have a strong economy before everything came to a screeching halt, and if history repeats itself, we won't miss very many beats when the ball starts rolling again. So from that standpoint, I don't think that it's all gloom and doom. It's going to take a while. This is going to be a huge economic downturn in not only our local economy, but the world for that matter. I think that we've, who knew what Zoom was before this all started? None of us did. We thought a webinar was all about just listen to an instructor talk and take notes. And all of a sudden, we've found ways to continue to do business without spending some of the resources that we've spent in the past. And so there are going to be some positive outcomes from this, I believe. I think if we all just hang in there and continue to play well in the sandbox with one another, we're going to come out stronger in the end. I told Rob this the other day. I said, the average member has no idea the professionalism, dedication, determination, and stick-to-itiveness that our staff at the SAR has. They really carried the ball for each one of us an awful lot further than most of us realize.
And I want to commend the work that's been done by Realtor members over the last few years to stay in touch and be connected to our decision makers on the state level, the county level, the city level. It is, if you ever wanted to know the importance of being connected and staying involved, just the results of what have happened just these last few weeks, where we have gone from a position of being non-essential to now finding a place and being able to recraft that is clearly the result of the hard work that's been done to make those connections. Bernadette Pillar wrote something that's a great closing thought for us. She wanted to share a message that was received, that she got back from Annie. We talked about the legal side for Washington Realtors. It said, "Thank you, Bernadette. I love my Realtor family, and I mean that sincerely. We will all get through this together." It's good to remember as we wrap up, the messages from today are, if you do have a legal question, make sure that you get it to Annie, because she's great at responding. There's also a good frequently asked questions page. The two sites for information that are most important are going to be Washington Realtors COVID-19 site, also the NAR coronavirus site. Those are two great places for us to look at. There's also going to be ancillary areas that we've addressed as well on our Spokane Association Realtor site. That would be everything from small business loans to unemployment compensation. Those are places, the best places to get information. And of course, please join us for these kind of webinars. Eric, you had one more thought before we
NAR also has the right tools right now with free clock hour classes and a host of things you can be doing. C2EX is another thing, a commitment to excellence, Realtor commitment to excellence. All of you have access to this if you go to nar.realtor and log into your account. So please take advantage of those tools, because frankly, you pay to be a member of the National Association of Realtors, so you should take advantage of those things.
One other thing that just came up yesterday or the day before is 2 months of free telehealth through NAR, which I don't know how many of you have noticed that, but if you have insurance, you probably have telehealth, so it won't matter to you. But those folks that don't have good insurance can all of a sudden have some benefits that they wouldn't have had otherwise for the next couple of months.
That's great to know. We'll try to put more extreme message that. All right, panelists, thank you so much for your time. Those of you who have joined us on as well, looks like we've had up to upwards of 100 participants on this. And be sure that the information that you get here today, you pass along. You've got a good source for that information. It came directly from your local association for the state. One of the biggest challenges we have is making sure that A, information isn't bad to begin with, or B, it's up to date to make sure that it's timely. So please do yourself a favor and the rest of your co-workers a favor by keeping up with those kinds of elements. And those are the pathways. We'll continue to try to hold these whenever we see there's enough changes or things like that to benefit. And Tom, and to my panel today, thank you so much for being part of it. And good luck.
And
stay with
safe.
this stronger when it's all done. Please stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.